can't get past it. They're just there. Spoken like a mother. What a great intro to the podcast. Hello, my name is Roxanne Wilson, and welcome to RoxTalks. This is I always like to say a very special episode, but this really is because it's my mom. Hi, Mom. And it makes sense that you said yes, because I remember when I was a little girl and I was trying to cook before I decided I couldn't cook, back in the day. I made chocolate cookies, and I did my best. I tried hard. Now, when I put them in the oven, I distinctly remember I put them in on one of those, not a cookie sheet, but the ones that have the slots. And I didn't put any foil on it because I was young, who knew? And I also had a lot of eggshells in it. So if you can imagine, which I didn't know that either, but when I'm cooking these cookies, all of a sudden fire is starting inside of the oven because it's falling down. And when the ones that were left, they didn't look like cookies, but my mom ate them. You ate them, Mom.
I didn't want to crush your little heart because you put so much into making those cookies. So I ate the cookies and told you, so good.
And I ate it, and I'm like, that's not very
What
good.
am I doing?
But that's a good example of you being a mom. And so happy Mother's Day, and thank you, Mom, for being here.
Thank you.
So if you are watching the podcast on YouTube, hello. If you're not, I encourage you to later go ahead and check it out on the RoxTalks channel so you can see my mama. Yay. So I thought, since it is Mother's Day weekend, we would talk a little bit about advice my mom gave me. And the only way we can talk about advice my mom gave me is to have my mom on. See how that works? So, but Mom, let me tell you a little, she's my mom, but her name is Dr. Patricia Neff. She is a professor and an educator. And how else would you describe yourself, Mom?
Oh dear, I'm an educational consultant because I am retired from Arizona State University.
So let's get into advice my mom has given me. Something my mother has always told me is, Roxanne, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Correct?
That's correct.
Now, why on earth would you ever have to tell me that? Come on now.
Well, because you were the child who when the thought hit the brain, it came right out the mouth. You had very little filters. You did not use a filter to think about, okay, now, is this the right time to say this? Is this the right way to say this? Is there a better way to say this? Should I wait until it's a more appropriate time? Thought hit the brain, out the mouth.
Yeah.
And when you were asked, well, why did you say that? You would say, but it's true. Yes, it's true. However, you have to think about whether or not it is the right thing to say, and it's always the right time to say it.
I have to tell you that that has stuck with me forever because you said it a lot.
Yes, I did.
And I'd like to think it somewhat worked, because people always tell me, Roxanne, you're so politically correct, or Roxanne, you hold your tongue. And I'm like, I do? My mom? Tell my mom. And call my mom and tell her, because she'd be so proud. So well done. And I think this is good advice for anyone at any point in time, for sure. Okay, what's one that you have that you remember or maybe when you're trying to tell me right now, who knows?
I don't know. One memory that I have is being in the grocery store, and you were always a sleuth. We were in the grocery store, and you said, Mom, that man looks suspicious. I'm going to follow him and see what he's up to. And I looked at my little, 6, 7-year-old, and what are you going to do? You follow him and see what he's up to. What are you going to do? And you literally wanted to follow the man to make sure he was not up to something wrong or suspicious or whatever, but you always felt that you could handle whatever it is came your way. So I always had to tell you or remind you that you were a child and that you did not have the authority nor the ability to apprehend someone.
Citizen's arrest is the thing.
Caught in the midst of doing something that was wrong.
I still do that, just so you know. where I look, I'm like, that person looks suspicious. Maybe I should follow them. And I follow from a distance, or I look or keep an eye on them. But that's funny that you tell me that, because I'm still like, to this day, I'm like, what's going on there? Because I think, what if I don't want to be the person that they interview and they're like, oh yeah, well, I saw him doing such and such, and I just didn't think about it, so I'm still that person. Gonna have to work on that one. I remember something you would always say to me in different phases of my life, but I remember it distinctly after I was on The Apprentice and you were watching the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in one episode, said, I don't give a shit. And I remember you like, Roxanne, that's not proper. Why would you say that? That's not very proper. And then you reminded me that your pastor was watching. I don't know if I've become proper, but I think what I loved about that and you is that you always wanted me to be a lady in whatever I was doing. Of course, that always has caused me to want to like be a potty mouth around you just to shock you.
Well, and I've called you that too.
Yes, you have. But you always wanted to instill those ladylike characteristics inside me, because I think that ultimately I'm more, if you can make something feminine or masculine, I'm more masculine and just being just like, I'm out there, which tends to be a more male trait, masculine trait. So you'd always kind of like remind me.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Right?
That's true. That's true. I grew up, as you mentioned, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and I grew up in a family that we did not curse or cuss, however you want to say it. I can't even say the word correctly. We just didn't. And using foul language was just something we did not do. I'm from a family of 10 children, 6 girls and 4 boys, and we did not use foul language. Our parents didn't, and we did not either. Even to this day, my siblings, we don't use foul language. The children may, but my siblings don't, because of how we were raised. And to hear a child of mine use language like that, and one might say that's a mild word, and it is, relatively speaking, but I cringe, when I hear that kind of language, because it's just not me. It's just not, who I am. And yes, it's not ladylike to use that kind of language at all. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a way to communicate your displeasure about something in a milder tone.
Some people say that cursing,
but one could be just as effective.
Right. Some people say it's lazy. It's very easy. But I do feel like the world is changing in the sense where you're hearing a lot more words, bombs and words and things. Don't you agree?
Yeah, you are. But you know what? I think when you practice that kind of language, it's easy for it to roll off of your tongue. Mm-hmm. Those words just don't roll off of my tongue. It just doesn't. Yeah. Because I've never practiced that kind of language. So, and if I try to say any of those words, they sound
strange. Funny. I know. Like,
it sounds funny. It just doesn't. It doesn't have the impact. It does. If someone else who has adopted that as a second language, mm-hmm. It doesn't have that impact, because it just doesn't sound, the tone, it just doesn't sound right. Yeah.
And while I laugh and say, like, I'd like to say bad word around my mom, because like, I will say that you instilling that in me while I did curse on national TV, I then went on to do home shopping, where there was no dump button or anything, no censors, and I never cursed on TV. Thank you for 5 years, ever. So, and I didn't find the need to, or almost slip. So I will credit that to you, Patricia. Well done.
Well, thank you. You have to have those filters within you. You don't always have the opportunity for someone to tell you and to correct based on what they say. And I prefer to self-correct than to be told, hey, I prefer to self-correct.
All right. So what's one nugget of advice that you love to give?
Well, what I'd like to tell parents or mothers, mm-hmm. is that when you have a child and you give birth to a child, you have approximately 936 weeks with that child. 936 weeks until they turn 18, till the 18th birthday. And whatever you do with them in that time frame matters. It counts. So let's say, for example, let me give you a visual. Let's say, for example, you put 936 marbles in a bottle, a clear glass bottle. And every week you remove one marble, put in another container. It kind of gives you a visual of how much time you've already spent with your child and how much time you have left with that child before they turn 18. So when you look at the two, you either look at, okay, I've already spent a third of this jar with my child. Have I poured everything into them that I need to pour into them to help them through the next however many number of marbles? Or you could look at the jar that you're pulling the marbles from and say, okay, I have this many marbles left, this many weeks left. What am I going to do with those weeks to ensure that when my child turns 18 and they're ready to go off to college, ready to go off into the world, they are equipped, they're ready, they have enough, poured into them so they could function mentally, physically, financially, spiritually. Have I put enough? What am I going to do to make sure that those remaining weeks count for something? So, that's the one advice I would give to parents, because when you have a child, you're never given a manual. There is no manual that says, now you're a newborn mother, here are the rules that you follow for the next 18 years. When you purchase any major appliance, be it a refrigerator, a TV, even when you buy a pen or some simple gadget, there is a manual that comes with it, albeit now you get the manual online, but there's a manual that comes with it that says, this is how you start, this is how you connect it up, this is what you do, this is how you troubleshoot, this is how you take care of it. Well, with a child, we do not have those manuals. And you're left to either parent based on how you were parented, or you just have to parent one day at a time, luck of the draw, trial and error, whatever you use, or some of us refer to books. And what I've discovered early in my parenting is that the people who wrote those books, they weren't parents. So they really haven't experienced parenting. They're just basing their books based on research and what they've read. And because there is no manual for you, you really have to try to utilize all the resources that you could possibly find to help you do a better job at parenting your child.
So what resources do you recommend?
Well, the internet is a great source, of course.
The World Wide Web?
The World Wide Web. Thankfully, we have research. You have research that's been done by reputable people who have, really looked into this whole thing about parenting, and there are different parenting models out there. Nurturing Parenting is an excellent resource.
Is that a website
for parents to use? It's called Nurturing Parenting.
Is it a website?
No, it's a curriculum. It's a curriculum resource.
Mm-hmm.
There's also one that's called Parenting Through the Phases. Teaching you how to parent through the phases of your child development. And for that one, you can go to parentingthroughthephases.org and or parentq.org, and it'll talk to you about the different phases of development that your child goes through, what to expect as they go through those phases, and how to be more intentional with your parenting. And that's another advice I would give, is that we learn to be more intentional with our parenting, because we want to make sure that we are truly guiding our children and helping them become the best young adults that they can become.
We should mention that my mother, Dr. Patricia Neff, who is an education consultant, also specialty in childhood development. So you
Yes,
being mothered by someone who teaches people how to mother. So in your opinion, do you feel like parenting has gotten easier or harder from the time you were doing it to, say, young parents now?
it has gotten harder. Parenting is hard work. And the thing about what makes it so hard, what makes it so difficult, is that by the time you've figured out your child, they've moved on to another phase. So let's say, for example, your child is a 2-year-old, and we've heard about the terrible twos. And by the time you've figured out how to work with this child and how to be the best parent you can be to a 2-year-old toddler, the child becomes 3. And now they enter a different phase. And now you have to figure out, okay, what's key about this phase? What's important about being a 3-year-old? What do I have to pay attention to? What are the questions I need to answer? What? So by the time you think you've figured it out, it's changed. And every 52 weeks, that changes. And so what you learn about your 3-year-old is not pertinent to your 4-year-old.
Does that, well, I hear you. Does that mean that your second and third child you should be a pro at then?
Oftentimes you are better. And that's why you find some parents who are extremely strict and rigid with their earlier children, first and second children. By the time the third one comes along, hey, they're not as strict and rigid, and because they've learned that they don't need to be, because they already know now what to expect as the child goes through the phases, so they don't have to be.
All old, like eldest children are all messed up then.
Well, that's our trial and error child. The first child is a trial, unless you've had experience with children, and thankfully I have had experience with children. I'm from a family of 10 children. I'm the third child, first girl. So I have seen many of my siblings born, and I have assisted in helping them to develop. So by the time I had my first child, I knew a lot of things. I knew how to do a lot of things. But for the most part, people don't. And unless you've had that experience either in a home like I did, or maybe you've worked in a daycare center, or you've helped with children, babysitting, nanny, whatever. Unless you've had that experience, you really don't know. So your first child is your trial and error child. You make a lot of mistakes with the first child that you tend to correct later on down.
Clearly, I'm not the oldest because I think it's hilarious.
No, you're not the oldest. You're the middle.
I'm the middle. That's right. Why do you think it's gotten harder for parents?
Part of the reason it's gotten harder as well is because of the world has changed. Mm-hmm. The technology has changed. Our children are exposed to much more than they were back then. When I was raised
about though, or do you really think that makes a difference? The technology is really
it does make a difference. Well, let me go back. When I was raising my children, you still went outside and rode your bikes. You still played outside, and it was a little safer. Right now it's not as safe. Children very rarely play outside anymore. They're in front of the computer, or in front of their iPads or telephones or whatever, some electronic gadget. And whereas that's, they have to learn that technology. The challenge is how many hours a day they spend on that technology, and how much of that time does not include interacting and communicating real time with people.
Face to face.
So it's a lot of FaceTime on the computer, on the gadget, but not face-to-face time. So the world has changed considerably, and while change is a good thing, and that's progress, I think we also have to learn to move to make those changes, so that we could certainly help them as they develop and grow in this new world that they're in.
Mm-hmm. So it's harder now.
It's harder. It's harder, but but again, it's all relative. Hard is all relative. It's harder for us older parents, okay? But for the parents who are having children now, that's all they know. That's all they know. So it's all relative. So for them, for me looking on, if I were to now, at this age, think about having children, I wouldn't.
Because you had such perfect children to begin with. Why would you go back to? I mean, come on now.
Well, perfect is a strong word. It's a strong word, but again, relatively speaking, my children were not too difficult to deal with. I've heard some mothers say, "Oh, girls are the worst," and I'm thinking, really? I didn't find my girls were the worst. I mean, I didn't have boys, but again, I also say, the Lord didn't give me boys because he knew I didn't have what I needed to raise boys. He gave me girls. So, hey, it was fine for me. But I've heard families who have both genders say, oh, the girls are the hardest to raise. And I've heard the other, as well, boys are the hardest to raise.
So why wouldn't you have them now?
I wouldn't have them now because it's harder.
Yeah.
Because it's harder to raise them now. And what children are exposed to right now, my kids weren't exposed to that, not at that early an age. When I look at preschool children being expelled from school, how can you be expelled from preschool? That's a very common thing these days. That's a tragedy when you have a preschool child being expelled from preschool.
Mm-hmm.
That's sad. I mean, that's a problem. But you have these preschool children who are in preschool who have no respect for the teachers or caregivers. They're mouthing off, they're talking back, they're bullying, they're being belligerent. When I was raising my children, preschool kids did not behave like that.
Yeah.
They follow directions, they were kind, they didn't bully. Of course, the odd child might bite, but biting is part of developing anyways. But now the kids nowadays, no. Mm-mm. So I would not want to have children. I would not want to be a new parent in this age, only because I've lived through the previous.
An easier time.
Yeah, right. But for parents who are having children now, that's all they know. So,
So power to them. You got this. What advice would you give, or what additional advice would you give to a parent now who has a child at any age, 18 or younger, or even early college?
Yeah. Well, I would say, get involved in some parenting groups. Some parents believe, well, if I go to a parenting class, that means I'm not doing a good job at parenting. Well, that's not necessarily true. Mm-hmm. It means that you are trying to find resources to help you be a better parent, that you're being proactive in getting the assistance you need and the tools that you need to be a better parent. Whereas, it has nothing to do with your ability to parent. It's more, to me, your ability to want to do better as a parent.
Like a lifetime learner, basically, is what you're saying.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So get into a parenting group that will teach you about the phases of development, so you understand your child. You understand what the phase that your child is currently in, and the phase that they're getting ready to go into. Mm-hmm. So you can be proactive in preparing for them. Also, be an advocate for your child. Be very involved in your child's education. Get to know their teachers, and the teachers get to know you, so that they know that you are an engaged parent who is willing and able to be supportive in the home. So be involved in what's going on with them in school, and seek help. Talk to other parents. Talk to grandparents. Find out what's out there and what's available. Where you can learn something, so that you can be, again, intentional about your parenting, and you can be more effective in what you do. It does take a village. We do not parent in a vacuum, because when you send your child to school every day, they're spending hours with other people, teachers, caregivers, whomever. By the time you get them back home in the evening and feed them and they go to bed, most of their waking hours are spent with others. So you have to depend on other people to help you raise your children. Again, and that's why you have to be so involved and engaged, so that you don't miss those opportunities to learn, and you don't miss those opportunities to be impactful in your children's lives.
Love it.
When they're on their way to college or getting ready for college, again, be proactive, be involved. I've come across parents who leave it up to the children to get things done for college. Well, that does not work very well. Every once in a while, you come across a student who takes the initiative and is bold enough and has the wherewithal to do that on their own. But for the most part, parents need to be able to guide their children through those, to at least navigate the waters of getting to college and so forth, to make sure, again, that they are headed down the right path, because
because they got
that in itself is a minefield.
Yeah, because just because they got a diploma does not mean they suddenly,
they don't
mean they have the life skills to get it right.
And because they're 18 does not mean they're an adult and they're ready to go into the world. You know, one of the things that really baffled me when I first came to America, about 33 years or so ago.
Oh, you think that's how long?
Yeah, it's been that long.
Really?
Yeah, well, you know, actually, it is longer than that. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to give you age. Okay?
I am the receipt.
I know. I'm trying to give you age. I said 33 years or so. They can add the rest to that.
Takes almost a decade, but okay, go ahead.
Was parents saying, "Oh, I can't wait for my child to be 18 so they can leave home." Well, really? You think an 18-year-old is ready to leave home?
It's a magic wand.
You know, it's not. You know, I'm from a culture where you stay home until you get married or until you decide to, and that could be into your 30s. You know, parenting does not end at 18. It really does not end at 18. You parent them when they're 18. You parent them when they're 30. You parent them when they're 40. You parent them when they're 50. Parenting never ends. It changes because the need changes. The need is different at the different levels and stages of their development. But parenting does not end. And we need to realize that we need to learn how to parent the 18 years and older children who are, yes, young adults, and some of them may be even grandparents by the time they're 36. But parenting never ends. It really doesn't end.
Mm-hmm. It's a lifetime.
It's a lifetime commitment.
It's a lifetime commitment.
It's a lifetime commitment because it is a commitment.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, and it's one of those commitments that you sometimes have didn't decide to make. You know, yes, you may have decided to have children. You made that commitment. Yes, oh, you got a surprise. Guess what? There's a surprise person coming. Well, inadvertently, you made a commitment. And that commitment doesn't go away because you didn't intend it.
Yeah.
The commitment is there.
So you were a young mother.
I was.
Which is interesting to me because I think to myself, if I have kids, they've already told me you have a geriatric pregnancy. I'm like, that's really nice to say. Like, come on. You think geriatric, you think like rest home, right? But I find it so interesting because I think to myself how different we are in that regard. I mean, you had your first child when you were in your teens.
19. Yes.
Married, but you had it like
at 18. I got married at 18. Had my first child at 19. Mm-hmm. And the others 4 years at 4-year intervals. Yeah, 3.5, 4-year intervals.
As the middle child, I wanted to make sure everyone knew I was only 3.5 younger than Rhonda, not 4. That makes a difference.
Okay.
But it's interesting because I think the phenomenon more and more is to have children older. Now, some of us have gone beyond that older age. But what are your thoughts on that, seeing that? Because I think to myself, you did it right. You were able to be a young mom, a young grandma, and then, okay, they're out of the house. I'm still parenting them, but you're able to live your life and go do fun things.
Right.
If I have a child now, or like I think about Hoda Kotb, who loved that she had those 2 children. But I mean, like, I guess with her money, she can still run around. But I'm saying, like, I can't just run around, you know? I'll be the oldest one in the... Not that I'm thinking about it, but since it's Mother's Day, I feel like I should talk about it. My baby's right here.
Hey, Mila. That's my granddaughter.
That is your granddaughter.
My granddaughter.
But what are your thoughts on that? Because you really, I mean, I don't think you planned to do it right, but you did it right.
You know, I think I did it right only because I was at that stage in my life where I could have done that. You know, I got married at an early age, 18. You kind of knew what I wanted to do, you know, albeit I wanted to have 8 children. Mm-hmm. So I had to start early. But by the time I had 3, I said, that's enough. That's enough. But that's, you know, and you're not certain of what life is, or when you really don't know what it involves to have 8 children.
Was Dad okay with children?
Excuse me?
Was Dad okay with the idea of 8 children back then?
I don't know. I don't even remember if it was. I just knew I wanted to have the 8 children. I was a very mature 19-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old when I had my daughter. There are 19-year-olds right now who, to me, are more like 12-year-olds.
Mhm.
They're not mature enough to embark on that kind of a decision.
Mhm.
Yes, there are some who do have them early, and unfortunately, some of them have not been really parented well, because their parents may have had them early, and now they're having children early, and it's a responsibility that they're not really yet ready for.
Mhm.
In the 30s, there are still some 30-year-olds who aren't ready who are mature enough to have
Being
children.
mature is not a number, right? Is
But
what
of course, but of course, that's right. It's not a number. But of course, medically speaking, it becomes a high risk pregnancy when the older you get, and having children. But as an older person, a 40-something-year-old who is wanting to now have their first child, you know, physically they can do it, medically they can do it. Is But and some don't even really think about, well, 20 years from now, I'll be 60.
AARP and and my child.
But it's okay. I mean, it's their decision. That it's a woman's decision whether or not she wants to have a child at a later age. As long as she feels that she's able to do it and take care of that child, and and make plans for in the event that she's not here.
Mhm.
It's all relative. It varies depending on who it is.
Yeah. Don't get your hopes up. I was asking for
I thought you were gonna surprise me with an announcement or
They
something.
did that on Today's Show. Did you see that? It was so cute. They had a whole Mother's Day thing yesterday, and they had like a brunch. And Mother's was there with her daughter, and she gave her a gift, and they opened it up, and she started screaming. It was a T-shirt. So she started screaming, and it said like, "You're gonna be a grandmother" or something. And it was
Wow.
Yeah. Not that. That's not what this podcast is about, though. No.
Just checking.
Well, Mom, this has been wonderful. Are there any parting words you would like to share?
Well, like I said earlier, when you become a parent, it's a commitment. You can't say, well, I really didn't want to have a child. That's a moot point. Once you went through that pregnancy and gave birth to that child, it's a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that you didn't intend to, didn't mean to, didn't want to, you have a child, you have a commitment, and that child deserves the best parent that you can give them. It doesn't have to be a perfect parent, because there's no such thing. It doesn't have to be a parent like, there's no such thing. That child deserves the best parent you can give them. And yes, it may mean sleepless nights, less time for yourself, less money for yourself. You can't buy everything you want to buy for yourself or go on the vacations you want to go by yourself. It means that you have to honor that commitment and do the best you can for that child, and realize that it's a lifetime commitment. It does not end at any particular age.
I will put a link on the podcast page. So it's roxannewilson.com/RT40. It's the 40th episode. Look at you. Very good. Thank you, Mom. The only thing I also wanted to add was Happy Mother's Day, A.
Thank you.
And B, thank you for being an amazing mom and putting up with me. I'm a whole lot to put up with. But no, seriously, I thank you for never giving up on me, always believing in me and championing me. And I love you dearly. And
I love you too.
Love you, Mom. Thank you so much for listening to RoxTalks. I hope you've had some time I hope you've gotten some good tidbits from this. I know that you have. Remember, if you're listening to the podcast, the full version will be on YouTube, so you can see the rest of the story, as well as if you're watching or listening, I should say, if you're listening. I'd love for you to subscribe, whether that's on iTunes, on Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play. Please subscribe and comment and rate the podcast. All of that helps. And if you are listening on your phone, please screenshot it and then tag me on Instagram and send it to me. I will shout you out on my Instagram story as well too. Appreciate you guys very much, and I can't wait to see you next time. Take care. Bye.